This is The Fabulist. I'm Joel Pilger, and I'm diving deep into the intersection of creativity and commerce with little more than my curiosity and a microphone. Along with my generous collaborators at Coop Studios, I'm traveling the world to gather all the insights that studio leaders need but are way too busy to grasp. I'm talking to the motion makers, the fable finders, the storytellers. If you're running a disruptive enterprise in motion or animation, live action, sound or music, experiential, I'm here to celebrate you for not merely participating in the industry, but for reinventing it. Because the future isn't just coming at us, it's being created. So let's get after it. Well, dude, what I think is so fun about you, I think why you and I enjoy riffing and working together as we do, is you have this context that I love. You have lived more than a minute and walked more than a mile in the shoes of the studio owner, right? Think of your days at State. Okay. Then I think of your years at Buck, where you're in the arguably the largest shop on the planet, and you have all that experience and breadth. And now you've been working with owners, founders, other shops of all shapes and sizes. So now you have this, I don't know, depth and breadth of knowledge. But you still have this similar fire in the belly of like, I think the creative people deserve to win.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's crazy to think about. It's still hard, right? Even with all the experience and as people try to move into, again, evolve and grow their businesses, I still feel like I'm up at night at midnight with a lot of owners where I'm like, yeah, you still have to, is this still hard work? Like running a creative business is still incredibly hard and it doesn't get easier. You have to have that curiosity and that drive to be like, how do we move our company forward? How do we partner better with these people? And again, I say curiosity is 90% of this. That'll often get you there. But a willingness to be curious in your business and with your clients is the harder part.
So this actually dovetails nicely into the first point that I want us to unpack, because you and I both get approached by so many production companies and studios and other creative companies where an owner is, I want fill in the blank. Like, oh, I want to grow. I want more business. I want to do this kind of work. And it's funny, I don't know if this is like collapsing things too quickly, but I often find myself asking, yeah, but how badly do you want it? Because the shops, that person doesn't have that thing you just described, that insatiable curiosity, that, let's call it, unquenchable fire in the belly. I don't know if I can, like with a clear conscience, tell that person, oh, just do these things and you will do well. Because it is super, super hard. So that tees up this question. Not everyone's struggling, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you heard me say this statistic the other day that I heard on a data-based assertion that there are at least 20 shops every day opening. And that's based on data. So think about that times 365 days a year, right? The market's flooded. But on the other hand, we're living in this era of content and creativity and explosion and all these sorts of things. So in this world, there are some shops that are crushing it. There are some shops that are doing consistently well, and they've been doing well despite post-pandemics and other things. Do you see any patterns? What are some of these people doing right?
Oh man, there's like 10, we're going to respond 10 different ways to that question. Well, first to the first thing you said, and it kind of leads into the question, which is like, shops are killing it. Like, what does success mean to any one shop? And I think that often is a challenge that owners have and everyone has, is that a lot of business is based on irrational emotions, right? Like what is success to one is not success to another. And so I think it's important to just like understand that when we grow companies and we do things as humans, or we have a desire, that it's not all just strategy, tactics, your point. Like you can't just give someone a template to succeed and expect they're going to execute it perfectly because people are different. Humans are different. Success looks different. So it is always like the first thing I think everyone should do when they have a company is before you figure out a revenue goal or anything else is you have to define these human goals that you have with yourself or your partners or the people you work with. Because again, some of the people that I know are crushing it might not be crushing it the same way in revenue to another company, but to them, that is absolutely killing it. That is giving them a good life. And I think it's important, again, although we talk about it is hard work, no matter what scale it's at, it does not mean it's not like a hustle grind culture thing, right? It does not mean you can be happy at a size or a scale or a revenue that is not a global huge company or just an independent solopreneur. So I'll just set that up first.
Well, let me just agree with you in that there's a whole spectrum of what success means.
We could probably talk about that for 2 hours, just that. But okay, shops that are doing things right or what's going on. As always, I will set up my macro observation or what's happening from a market perspective, because again, we don't have a lot of control. Our buyers are unique in the sense of there's not 100 million of them, so demand often drives a lot of where we see needs growing. And that kind of drives how I think companies who position themselves well and understand that are the ones who are successful. So, Joe, what does all that mean? I think kind of going to the point a second ago, like needs are shifting. And this idea, Joel, that you and I have talked about before as well is like growth levels and expectation. And I'll often talk to studios where I'm like, hey, when you want to grow into a new level or you want to try to get a new work, you have to understand what is expected at that level, right? What is expected from a services perspective, from a budgeting, it's just like a business acumen perspective, roles, right? Decision making is not just about how good you are. It's about the security or safety. If someone's going to give you way more money so they feel like you can handle it. But I think there's like a shift a bit in this. I don't know if it's levels or like, I'm trying to think of like a shape. Like, is it a triangle or is it a rectangle? But think about the top. The very top, you have the world's biggest brands in the world. The middle, you've kind of got these, I don't know, 100 million plus. They're doing great, but they're not Apple, they're not Google. And then you've got DTC and above, if we just took like those top three categories. And I think what's interesting is that in the past, all the big brands, they had big agencies, right? So for a lot of creative companies, they would go up and work with the agencies and they would feed the big brands. The middle brands are always kind of in this shifting in between, which is where I think a lot of studios, it's where you put in reps, it's where you work out. And then the sort of like the smaller to mid-sized companies are where a lot of us got our start, right? And this could be anything to like a local business, to a DTC brand. And I think if the larger companies, the big brands, and they would work with agencies at the top, I think the shift that's happening is that they've gotten smart. They've gotten smart to the fact that needs are fast, things are moving quickly, and it actually isn't efficient to have a large, humongous board that is ineffective at supporting you. Needs are just too many fast-moving needs. There's too many teams that require coordination, and it is hard. This is an operations challenge. So the idea of having a agency or a creative partner who owns all of something just becomes ineffective and inefficient. And so what we're seeing is that those brands have built out teams in-house. And I'll say in three categories. They've built out in-house agencies. So they've just recreated the agency. They've built out in-house creative teams, which is what I think we come from, Joel, you and I, and probably a lot of these listeners. But they're also starting to create in-house content studios, which are strictly content studios and have often a meme or a social media twinge to it, right? Or a focus to it. So all of a sudden, they've kind of created these three groups internally because they know they really need those needs. So they need a lot less, WPPs and VMLs, and they need a lot more folks like us, right? Now, because they are smart, they know what they need. I think large companies who've built out in-house teams probably need smaller teams, right? Because they need help on very specific tactical things that doesn't make sense for them to scale. But all of a sudden, this lower to mid funnel, these DTC brands, it's like three people. It's like a founder and a developer. They actually need someone to own a marketing campaign. They actually need someone to own more of the stack. So although the revenue might not be there, that also might be a good training ground for a creative company who wants to expand their services or start to explore bringing on something new. So again, I don't think needs have gone away. I don't think demand has disappeared. I think it's shifted. It shifted across the media landscape, and it's shifted based on what the needs are for a different level of client.
Super interesting because, well, first of all, I'm going to say, for anyone who doesn't know DTC, that's direct to consumer. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. I have been, I don't know, trumpeting this thing for almost 20 years now called direct to brand. Go brand direct. Do it. And I'm just going to continue trumpeting that. And it's a bit of what I'm hearing you say. I know I'm grossly oversimplifying, but I think the whole reason so many shops did work for agencies and for entertainment and so forth is they were quick buyers. They knew how to buy from us. They showed up, they defined the problem into a project. They said, can you bid on this? We did, and we did the work, we got paid, and we just kept doing that and kept doing that. And I think those days are ending.
I think people are successful on both sides of the spectrum. I do think there are people who are successful going direct to brand. And I think a lot of us have generally worked a version of brand direct for a while. And I want people to feel encouraged that it is not this like fearful, scary thing to, it's like you will figure it out. Everyone is faking it. Like you work with every company in the world, and you're like, wow, this place is a mess. Like every place is a mess. Once you accept and realize that, kind of whatever. But there are tons of studios that are doing successfully, but it is hard. And the expectation is different. And that is not right for people. And I actually have friends that have been like, you know what? They've, let's say clarified and slim the studio and what they do. And they just work with agencies and they want reps now because all they want to do is show up and do the thing and crush it. And they're fine to have a smaller shop. They're fine to be more specific because they get to do the thing they love and they don't want to become someone who speaks marketing. They don't want to be someone who deals direct with brand. And that is okay as well.
So maybe if we can revisit the question and put a little bit of a fine point on it. If you were running a shop and you were saying, I really want to focus on the work. I want people to not bring me problems. I want projects. I want to execute and practice my craft and my skill and so forth. What might you be doing in contrast to the owner, the shop that says, we actually would love to bite off a bigger bite of this thing called going right into the brand, solving the problems, getting those big budgets and solving those gnarly problems and learning to speak marketing. So maybe let's compare and contrast. If you were running one shop versus the other, what would Joe do?
I don't think my advice would change. I think if you're the creative shop and you really want to focus on the craft and the discipline and the execution, you have to really invest into understanding where your needs exist. And I'm going to say a cheesy marketing line. Understand your customers, right? Understand what their needs are and go seek them and actually care. Again, going back to that curiosity, actually understand. And I think in the same way, someone who wants to work with marketing, we're in a moment where for a certain type of client, being a hyper-focus is really helpful because they need hyper-focused people to solve specific problems. Also, there are people who desperately need full partnership and people to own more of the, larger pie, let's say, outside of just the execution side. And I would say there's also strategic and intriguing ways you could set up deals with these companies, right? Or possibly make money long term that's a little bit different and unique, and exploring different ways of pricing. But you will never know any of this if you don't obsess over the person you work for, like really actually deeply understand. And this is the inherent tension when your work is also something that is often considered art, right? Like we struggle because commercial art and art are not the same things. And the work that we do that we're talking about here is commercial art. So like if you are in the business of commercial art, you need to understand what your commercial clients want and need and care about. You can't just stay in a, locked room and make cool stuff and think the doorbell's going to ring.
I love this perspective because I'm hearing in what you're saying what I would call simple empathy, right? Like just because you do this thing, it may not be relevant to the people that you think you serve until you've actually gotten outside of your own bubble, walked a mile in their shoes, all these things that we know that really just involve being a curious and good human.
90% of this is like being curious, being a good person, showing up every day, depositing coins in the piggy banks of humans, expect nothing in return, actually care, like actually care about your clients and understand what it is they're up against. And if you don't solve that, don't solve it for them. Don't think you have to solve every person's problem. But if you solve that problem, obsess, understand, like really care about it. And that if you just show up every day and do that for, again, the very specific person that you want to collaborate with, that's a very easy tactic.
All right. So it's funny that you use the phrase actually care because are we so anesthetized or numb to that thought that you have to add the emphasis of like, and I don't mean care. I mean, actually care.
I I say it for that exact reason, right? They don't really care. They just want to do their art and they're just a shut up client, right? It's more than just your cool keyframe or whatever it's happening. It's like, no, I have to sell through this like really ambitious creative that you're putting forward to me to a huge committee of people. So if you don't make that easier for me, I'm like unlikely to work with you again in the future. You have to think deeply and understand like, we all want these budgets, right? It's like, there's a lot of money, guys. This is not like small, piggy stuff, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. So the decisions are wide and vast and varying and emotional. Maybe this was my training as a producer, but it's like, I always joke that I'm like, I say to creative teams, I'm like, once you accept that every client's initial request is going to be over budget, short timeline, totally unfeasible, it's going to make no sense, just like accept that. Every single job that come in will check those boxes and then just get into problem solving mode. Say, okay, this is insane, but it's always insane. And that's okay, right? We always expect it to be insane because this isn't their world, right? I'm sure if I try to explain to a world-class chef, I'm like, oh yeah, just cook me up something. They'd be like, you're crazy, Joe. It doesn't work like that, right? Like, so why do we expect other people to understand the complexities of our business? So lose that expectation and everything will become easier.
Well, what I heard there was this is the job. Like this is why they call Joe, right? Like, hey, I got this thing and I only have this much money, but I need to get all this stuff done. And once you say, yeah, the difference between what they want and what they can actually achieve has to be solved. It's actually a puzzle. Well, that's the job.
This is your thing, but it's like they called you because you're the expert, right? Like if they knew how to do it, they would do it. Guess what? That's why they're on the phone with you. So it's always going to feel hard. Business is always going to feel hard. Decisions are hard. That's why, again, entrepreneurship is like a hard game. It is not a fun game. If you can find a place of curiosity, of being positive, saying, okay, it's why it's like getting obsessed over the process first is more important than getting obsessed with the outcome, right? Because if you get obsessed with like, I just have to always win every job and it has to be perfect. It's like, no, that's just not how it's going to work. And your business is not going to stay the same. No business has ever stayed the same for 10 plus years. But if you get obsessed with the process that allows you to be like, hey, that didn't work. All these clients I used to work with in broadcast don't exist anymore. So where do I go now? Like, go and find a way where you can understand, be curious about the person you work with, right? Find a way in which you can tell your stories in a way that actually connects with someone. And don't try and serve everyone. You have to serve specific people with specific challenges. If you try to serve everyone, you serve no one.
So now I'm curious. In our industry, we're going to say, let's say there's a field called motion design, and there's all these shops that play in that space. And then there's these different adjacencies, we'll call it, which is that big word for next door is live action, and next door to that is editorial, and next door to that is motion branding. And we start constructing maybe different concentric circles and so forth. I'm curious to hear from you. What are the adjacencies that you think are really interesting or really exciting that most people aren't even paying attention to because they're still so focused on, but this is the way we've always made money in the past, right? Like we do commercials and they look at these adjacencies and they go, what? We can do that?
That is the curiosity thing. I think this willingness to be curious and explore, and this is a very, again, individual human thing. Roadblocks don't stop you from doing the thing, right? Like if you used to work with a certain client type, they don't exist anymore, you don't stop working. The thing that curiosity driving people to say, oh, well, like I used to do a lot of motion graphics for broadcast networks, but I've noticed that there's a lot of little animation happening in small devices. Or you could be somebody who did motion graphics for broadcast networks, and you could be like, wow, there's a lot of animation and motion showing up in physical spaces. Or you could be someone who did motion graphics for broadcast networks, and you could realize, hey, there's a lot of animation in this AR, AI, VR stuff, right? So you have to be, I think, willing to understand that there are people out there who have a need for what you do most often. But we get stuck on these traditional legacy client categories or expectation of a certain type of person we work with. But no, I trust you. The thing that you do, someone else also desperately wants, that obsessive nature in which you put into it. It is just not the same person it used to be. But if you are not willing and curious to go out and figure out who that person is, it's a new person. You've never met them before, right? They didn't even know your industry existed. That industry they were in probably didn't exist 10 years ago. So it is a full contact sport in the willingness of curiosity to go out there and understand those needs.
I'm thinking of how often there is a drumbeat of frustration and struggle and disillusionment that is always happening in any industry, but especially in ours, where creatives are bemoaning AI or the race to the bottom or these sorts of things. And I'm thinking about what you said earlier. You said, no business has lasted more than 10 years without going through massive change. And maybe this is just a good reminder or opportunity to say to everybody, hey, look, this is the job. It's always been the job. Maybe we had a decade here and there where things weren't super disruptive and constantly changing. And maybe some of us got lulled by that. But once we wake up and realize, oh, this is always the job, does that, I don't know. I guess the answer is there's this curiosity that's going to drive you forward as one opportunity goes away and the next one arises, right?
This is my favorite thing. It's my favorite topic because, it's future shock. Change is the only constant, or the only constant is change. I always screw it up. If you're a 12-year-old or 10-year-old who's entering the creative world and you've got an iPhone, you have no nostalgic point of view to what creativity means to you. But we are, again, patterned, is imprinted on us as when I started, this is how it worked. And now how I work doesn't do it. But the challenge is you've built all this infrastructure underneath it, right? You've built all this, sometimes literally physical infrastructure and human infrastructure. And this is why it gets harder for bigger shops. But it's some people are like, oh, it'll come back. I'm like, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's never coming back. It's different. It's changed. It hasn't gone away. It has just shifted because the market has shifted. The environment around us has shifted. It's no longer a it's no longer a hot summer. It's a fall day or whatever. So I think when you can accept that, not allowing yourself to get so attached to this idea of what it used to be, but getting attached to this idea of a creative person who brings stories to life through animation, through editorial, through whatever. I get excited actually now just talking about it, because like as a kid, it's like, oh wow, like to explore that, like that's the curiosity drive I want. I don't care about staying up till 2 a.m. grinding. The spark that I want to see in someone is a willingness. Is there's too many, I'm going to go on a rant now for 10 seconds. Like there's too many, can't teach an old dog new tricks out there, right? Of like, I say, I'm like, you don't have it in you anymore. And that's okay. Just accept it. If you don't have it in you anymore, is also okay. You can use that to move forward. But if you want to adapt, if you want to evolve, as Scott Galloway says, the smaller screen you're working on, the better, right? Like there is a certain person I would be like, just ride this out for another 10 years and just like see this thing home, right? Like don't switch it up at this point. But for a lot of us, like we just have to accept things are changing and that's okay. Like make it fun, but you have to know what matters. And the only way you're going to know what matters is to go out there and be curious and understand what those needs are.
Those people that are innovating on that edge, they don't have a lot of competition. They have a lot of freedom. They tend to get nice budgets because where there's mystery, there's margin. You know that concept? And so when I think of like interactive, and I'm going to call it experiential, which is all this in real life type of stuff, that adjacency. Do you likewise think that's a really interesting space that some people are starting to own
I do.
and define?
Yes, I definitely think there are a few people starting to own that space. I want to like call it the risks with the adjacencies as well, because I think there's two big risks. One, which is when people start to add on services, all of a sudden someone has to make a new point of view of you because they kind of see you in a certain way. And it's not something that you can change someone's perception overnight. Like, hey, I know you, like this is what I do, but I'm doing this new thing now. And not that you have to commit to something fully to go for it. But the second side to risk is like if you wanted to move into product or experiential, and you know, my wife is an EP and in that world, like it is hard, it is different. Like you can't go in also thinking you understand everything. And you have to go, like there are players often, there is a game that is happening and there is a sort of expectation. So I think as people, we have to adapt and we have to evolve. But as we sort of wade into these waters, understand that you have to learn and you will have to like work your way up as well, right? You have to kind of grow that work, show you can be trusted. And this is true of every company, true of Buck to ever. It's like started to do new things. There's no expectation that in 2 months, all of a sudden that we were going to be crushing it in that, right? You have to grow these muscles, grow these relationships, grow trust, right? You can be the best shop in the world at one thing. Doesn't mean you're going to be the best shop in the world at the other thing. But it goes back to the importance of positioning, your marketing, the story you tell, right? If you're okay, well, you do that, but you also do this. I'm so confused. I'm just going to go to the shop that only does that one thing because I know they're going to do it the best, right? Like that could be the other side to this. So just weighing the pros and cons, right? It's not binary. It's not one right or wrong way. Just understand.
So you and I promised ourselves that we would keep this conversation in bounds. So I'm going to ask a wrap up question, if you'll forgive me from, because we could go down, we could take any one of these topics and spend days on this. What's Joe excited about? What's pulling you into the future right now?
Brand trackers at XYZ. There's two parts to my life. I mean, I've been very lucky, as you mentioned earlier, to work with a bunch of studios. And as I try and sunset that as much as possible, you know, I think being curious and understanding needs, the actually caring part, it is a lot of work to go and figure a lot of that stuff out. So for folks that know me, I've got a newsletter called Brand Trackers. We actually haven't published it in a few weeks, but we've been building a sort of a database, a product where we can hopefully make a lot of this more accessible. Really, all we're trying to do is organize all the incredible creative work that brands put out and kind of tie it back to the humans who create it and the humans who need it. And so we have a sort of a beta is coming out in the next couple of weeks. So that's the main focus, although I'm very lucky to work with some incredible studios. And to your point, the last year and a half, I think I've learned more in the last year and a half working with such a wide range of companies than any other time in my life. And it's everyone is unique and different. And if you're struggling or if you're killing it or whatever, like you are not alone. The best and the worst are all going through it as well. So it's a crazy world.
I'm smiling because I think maybe you can relate to this. Sometimes I feel like I think my job and what I get paid to do is to learn because I I'm curious and I work with so many different people and stuff that it's like, wow, everything that I'm learning is sometimes overwhelming, but I love it.
I'm a knowledge thief. I'm like, oh, I'm a knowledge thief. I just steal all the knowledge. But you have to, like, never losing that is the important thing, right? Like, no matter what, I will probably still always work with a couple studios. No matter what, although I'm building a tool to help me research, I will still like do it. I will still sit there and kind of look and explore and like make it hard mode, and not for the sake of doing it, but for the sake of curiosity and digging.
Well, I'm excited to see, what's coming with brand trackers and your other things that you have in development. And I'm glad you're keeping your hands like in the sausage because I think that keeps us relevant of just like, hey, how do I actually just show up every day and run this company and to be able to help those people? So thank you for what you do. Thanks for being on the podcast. And I can't wait to see you hopefully for dinner in New York soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joel.
Thanks for listening. And thanks to my collaborators at Coop Studios. To learn more about them, visit coopstudios.com. As for you, if you're focused on running a strong and thriving creative company, consider joining Forum, my private network of the world's leading studios. For details, go to joelpilger.com.